There was something incredibly special about children's television in the 90s. It was colorful, inventive, chaotic, and above all, it trusted its audience. Kids TV didn't talk down to you, instead it invited you in, encouraged curiosity, creativity, and imagination, and often felt like it was being made by people who genuinely loved what they were doing. And right in the middle of that golden era came a show that didn't just entertain, but actively encouraged an entire generation to become excited about art. A show that proved creativity didn't have to be perfect, it just had to be fun. That show was Smart. Premiering on BBC television in the mid-1990s, Smart was an art program like no other. It was the kind of show that made you want to rush off and recreate what you'd just seen using whatever you could find around the house. For many of us who grew up during the decade, Smart was a weekly invitation to be creative. And I can still remember watching it and immediately wanting to try making something from the show, even if my results never quite matched what was on screen. In this episode of the 90s Rewind, we're heading back to 1994 and the very first episode of Smart to see how the show introduced itself to the world and became one of the most beloved children's programs of the 90s and 2000s. If you enjoy nostalgic TV deep dives like this and would like to support the channel, please hit the like button and subscribe. Now grab your paints, pens and brushes as we rewind the tape back to where it all began, the debut episode of Smart. Before we dive into the debut episode of Smart, it's worth taking a moment to look at the show's origins. It's no surprise that the show was partly an answer to ITV's hugely successful Art Attack, which had debuted in 1990 and quickly became a favourite with young viewers. The BBC understandably wanted to capture some of that audience. However, this wasn't unfamiliar territory for the BBC. Smart was also very much rooted in the corporation's own long tradition of art programmes for children. Most notably Take Heart and Heartbeat, both hosted by the legendary Tony Hart and broadcast from the late 1970s through to the early 1990s. With Heartbeat coming to an end in 1993, it left a clear gap in the schedule, and just a year later, Smart would make its debut. Over the years, Smart would feature a number of different presenters, but the original lineup consisted of Zoe Ball, Mark Spate, and Jay Burridge. Zoe Ball had already appeared on children's BBC and was a familiar face from the preschool program Playdays, but this marked her first major role fronting a brand new show. For Mark Spate, this was quite literally his first job in television. He had initially been hired to paint the set for a TV production, which led to him auditioning for Smart. It was through this process that he met co-presenter Jay Burridge, for whom Smart would also be a television debut. Both Mark and Jay would go on to create all of the art projects featured on the show throughout its run. With the presenters in place, Smart was commissioned for an initial run of 6 episodes, which were filmed at the BBC's Pebble Mill studios in Birmingham. Let's now take a closer look at that very first episode of Smart, which was broadcast on Wednesday, October 5th, 1994. Our episode opens with the hosts asking a few art-related questions, a preview of what's to come on the show, before we hear that iconic Smart theme music for the first time. We start with Zoe, who's going to show us how to create a Thunderbird crashing through your bedroom wall effect. First, we need a big splat shape that's been painted black to create the hole for the Thunderbird to come through the wall. After this, we can use some white card to create the front of the vehicle by making some slits, taping them together, and stuffing the inside with newspaper to help it keep its shape. Next, it's time for the PVA glue and water mix with kitchen roll to help harden the shape and give it a nice 3D texture that's a bit bashed up. The Thunderbird has crashed through the wall, remember. Once this is dried, we can stick it to the black splat shape and then add some color to the car. To finish, you can add some wallpaper around the edges to complete the effect. Looks pretty cool, I think, although I'm not sure how happy my parents would have been if I had stuck something like this to the wall.
And I think they look FAB.
Next, we get a little video package of what is clearly a big art attack, with a group of school children stealing their dinner plates from the school cafeteria to create a large picture of a cheeseburger and a fizzy drink. After this, it's back to the studio with Jay, who's going to show us how to make a cool collage of a flag. Jay shows us something he's been working on, a black and white collage using images he's clipped out of fashion magazines, to which he can add some color images on top, giving it a really nice effect. Jay is going to show us how to make a collage version of the American flag, starting with a piece of card that can be used to cut out some different colored strips out of magazines. Using these, we can start building up the shape of the flag, adding all the different lines as we go. For the stars in the blue section, Jay recommends cutting out a star template from a sheet of card and using this to cut out the stars in a nice silver color, completing the collage. I quite like collage art, so something like this is definitely right up my street. Next, we meet Maddie Nicholson, a textile artist who paints huge banners for the outsides of buildings. At the moment, she's working on some banners depicting superheroes, and we get to see her paint one of these rather abstract-looking paintings. She starts by drawing a sketch on a large sheet of paper before transferring this to fabric. She then starts layering the basic colors for the painting, not paying too much attention to the lines and keeping things quite natural and free-flowing. Maddie tells us she got her start in art by sending in things she had created to the show Blue Peter, and sometimes they would make things on the show that she had sent in. We see a few of her previous pieces of work, including one where she painted the entire side of a boat. With all of the color applied to the painting, the last thing Maddie needs to do is to add all of the black outlines, and with that, the banner is complete.
Now I've finished it, I'll hang it up to dry.
Next, we get a short section called The Gallery, where viewers could send in their pieces of art to be displayed on the show. I distinctly remember trying to get my parents to send in some stuff that I had done when I was younger, but I'm not sure if they ever did send anything in for me. As a kid, that would have been really awesome to see your artwork featured on Smart. Back to the studio again with Mark, who's going to show us how to create stencils. To do this, he uses a poster from the movie Terminator 2. Placing a thin piece of paper on top enables you to mark out all of the dark areas of the poster, which can then be cut out to create the stencil. With the stencil ready, we can spray ink on it to create the effect. Mark uses something called a blitzer, which I'd never heard of before, which essentially turns any marker pen into an airbrush. Pretty cool device. Now the bit we've all been waiting for, the stencil is removed to reveal the final picture, which looks pretty awesome. For someone who had never done TV before this, other than an appearance on Blind Date as a contestant a few years earlier, Mark was an absolute natural in this role. He tells us there's no limit to the size of your stencils, as we see him dressed as the Terminator himself, making a giant image with paint in a water gun.
Hasta la vista, Arnie.
Next up is Morph, who I mostly associate with Smart, as that's what I grew up with, but Morph actually made his first ever television appearance in 1977 on Take Heart, looking a little different to how he does now. This first appearance on Smart sees Morph and Chaz get pushed off of their table by the mischievous Robomorph, and we can tune in again next week to see what happens. Zoe tells us that the show wants kids to write into the show with any artistic problems they have that they want solving. Katie from Essex wrote in to ask how you can stop chalk from smudging after you've finished your drawing, and the solution Jay gives us is surprisingly simple. Just use hairspray.
Leave it to dry for a few moments, and let's just give it a try. That doesn't smudge too much, and this side smudges terribly.
Neil from Edinburgh asks about how to draw expressions on faces, so Mark gives us a little demonstration.
If I wanted to make this girl look happy, I'd lift everything up. So the pupils would go up, the smile would go up, nice big toothy grin.
Lastly, there's a chance to win some art accessories. All you have to do is call in with your answer to the question on screen, and with that, the very first episode of Smart comes to an end.
Have a go, you may be smarter than you think. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Smart would prove to be one of the BBC's most successful children's television shows, running for an incredible 15 years and broadcasting almost 200 episodes. Zoe Ball would stay with the show for 2 years before being replaced by Josie Darby and then by Kirsten O'Brien. Jay Burridge would host until 2003, and there were a whole host of other presenters over the years. But the heart and soul of Smart was undoubtedly Mark Speight, whose infectious personality and joyful approach to art made the show what it was. We sadly lost Mark in April of 2008, and the next series of Smart, broadcast from June of that year, was dedicated to his memory. The show would continue for 2 more series, eventually coming to an end in March 2009. Smart wasn't just another children's TV show to fill the schedule, it was a creative gateway for an entire generation, showing kids that art didn't just belong in galleries, but on bedroom floors, kitchen tables, and school desks, and it could be made from anything you could get your hands on, including cereal boxes, magazines, scrap paper, foil, washing up liquid bottles, or random bits of cardboard rescued from the trash. For so many of us growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, Smart was a weekly reminder that being creative was for everyone, no matter your skill level. And the show's influence has quietly lived on long after the final episode in the confidence it gave people to have a go, to experiment, to make a mess, and to express themselves without fear of getting it wrong. That's why, decades later, Smart still feels so important, not just as a piece of television history, but as a formative part of so many of our childhoods. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'm sure you all have some great memories of this show, and I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. Do you remember any pieces of art you created after seeing it on Smart? Or were you one of the lucky ones who got your art exhibited on the show itself? Let me know your thoughts and memories in the comments below, and if you're enjoying the content here on the channel, a like and subscribe would be greatly appreciated. Many thanks again, and I'll see you again in the next video.